We moved into that neighborhood thinking it was going to be quiet and normal. Just families, kids riding bikes, nothing unusual. My sister and I were teenagers at the time, and we spent most afternoons outside, skating, messing around on our hoverboards, talking about whatever drama was happening at school. That's when we met Savannah. At first, she just seemed like another awkward kid from down the street. A little intense, a little socially off, but nothing that immediately screamed danger. She would show up uninvited sometimes and just stand there, watching us for a second before joining the conversation like she had been part of it the whole time. The first few weird comments she made, we brushed off. Middle schoolers say strange things. Some kids try too hard to be edgy. We figured that was all it was. But then the things she said started getting darker. Not cringe dark. Not I'm trying to be cool dark. Actually disturbing. She had claimed she tried to kill her teacher. My sister and I thought it was complete nonsense, or at least we really hoped it was. But Savannah took everything she said very seriously. She would go around telling neighbors about horrible crimes she had committed or wanted to commit. She even told us that the first time she saw us outside riding our hoverboards, she wished they would explode. One day, we watched as police officers showed up at her house. The jackets they were wearing said Juvenile Justice Department. Her mom brought me, my sister, and our mom outside to explain what was happening. Apparently, 2 years earlier, they had discovered Savannah messaging a man online. In those messages, she was trying to hire him to literally kill her parents. This came after she had already made threats about killing them a few days before. Later on, we were able to confirm that the story was true. We had PetSat for their family and found court documents about the whole situation. We already knew she was on probation, but she had always given us different excuses about why. Even after that, Savannah kept begging us to hang out with her. She would even invite herself over to spend the night. We avoided her as much as we could, but she would follow us everywhere. Things finally started to calm down when Autumn moved out, and not long after that, Savannah moved away with her family. Since then, she started doing community service at a horse stable and eventually graduated high school. I truly hope she's in a better place now and more emotionally stable. A few months ago, Autumn messaged my sister asking her to call her mom and confirm she was with us. She wasn't. Later, we saw her with a 19-year-old guy. She's 14 now. My sister, my mom, and I have moved since then as well. I've worked a handful of random jobs over the years. My very first job was when I was 16, a summer position during break at a dairy farm. I absolutely hated it. It honestly made it harder for me to feel motivated to look for work again when the time came. I don't even remember exactly how I got referred to that job. The following summer, though, I ended up working as an office assistant for a self-employed photographer. My parents knew her because she used to attend their church, and my sister had been in a 4-H program where she worked with her. By that time, her health had started declining. She claimed it was due to a combination of chronic Lyme disease and fibromyalgia. My parents had warned me ahead of time that she was a little different. She was deeply religious and claimed she had real encounters with demons and had even participated in a few exorcisms. I'm an atheist and naturally skeptical, so I never took those stories seriously. Aside from the strange things she would say, she was mostly harmless, and the job itself wasn't difficult. My main responsibilities were data entry, lightly editing her photos, adding her company watermark, and uploading them to a website where clients could browse and choose which images they wanted to purchase. She mainly photographed horse-related events, dressage, stadium jumping, cross-country competitions, and similar shows. For the first several months, I worked out of her living room, which basically served as my office space. Eventually, she convinced me to come along to events and trained me to take photos myself. Before long, I was shooting at the shows alongside her. I won't lie, it was pretty boring work. I'm not a horse person at all, but things didn't start getting strange until about a year later, when I found out the hard way that she wasn't the one I needed to be concerned about. She had 2 sons. One lived out of state, and the other was in the Navy. The second one, his name was Nate, was someone I had only heard small bits about. He was somewhere on the autism spectrum, although she was never specific about his exact diagnosis. She strongly believed he had been vaccine injured and that all of his unusual behaviors could be traced back to vaccines. When he eventually moved back home and I met him for the first time while I was working in her living room, he seemed nice enough. A little awkward, sure, but nothing alarming. He was really into movies, and since I'm somewhat of a movie buff myself, whenever he came into the living room to talk, the conversation almost always revolved around films we liked or upcoming releases we were excited about. At this point, I was 18 years old. He was in his mid-30s. Somehow, he got it into his head that I was interested in him romantically, even though he never directly said that to me. I didn't find out until my parents told me. My mom worked as the church secretary where my boss attended, and Nate knew that. I assume my boss told him. One afternoon, Nate showed up at my mom's desk and started talking about me nonstop. He went on about how much fun I was, how much he loved talking to me, and how he was planning to take me to the movies and to his church, along with all these other plans he had apparently made. My mom was extremely uncomfortable, and so was the pastor who overheard the conversation. When I got home that night, she told me what had happened and suggested I be careful not to lead him on. I was completely confused because I hadn't done anything. We had never talked about going out together or doing anything outside of casual conversations at his mom's house. Things became even more uncomfortable after I overheard a conversation between him and my boss in the next room. He was talking about his time in the Navy, and she was ranting about the dangers of Islam. At one point, he said in a completely serious voice, "If I had it my way, I'd just shoot and kill any Muslim I met." I was stunned when I heard that. My boss laughed like it was nothing, but something about the tone in his voice unsettled me. After that, I started making an effort to keep interactions with him short. Whenever he came around, I minimized conversation and made it clear I needed to focus on my work. Eventually, he moved out of his parents' house and got his own place, so I assumed the situation had resolved itself. A couple of years later, I had moved out too. My boss's business had shut down and I was working somewhere else. I was still friends with both her and Nate on Facebook. Around that time, I had finally started openly identifying as an atheist, something I couldn't do while living at home. One night, my former boss messaged me asking about a ring I was wearing in a photo. It was a black ring with a white solid star centered inside a black circle. Knowing where the conversation was headed, I told her it was just a ring. She started accusing me of wearing a pentagram. She didn't know what a pentacle was and insisted I was promoting Satan. I tried several times to explain that it wasn't that simple and that paganism has nothing to do with Satan, but she refused to listen. Eventually, I stopped responding because it was typical behavior for her and not worth arguing over. The next morning, I received a message from Nate telling me I needed to attend his church with him. I declined. The replies I got from him gradually became more aggressive. He shifted from asking to demanding that I go. He told me I was lost and that I wouldn't find the answers I was searching for by living the way I was. Eventually, he directly said that wearing a pentagram was disgusting and that I was opening myself up to possession. Knowing it would be pointless to argue with him, even more pointless than it had been with his mother, I blocked both of them and decided I was done. That's when he started showing up at my workplace. Whenever he came into the store, he would walk around until he found me. Once he did, he would corner me and just keep talking, no matter how many times I tried to step away or explain that I needed to get back to work. Eventually, my managers noticed what was happening and began intercepting him whenever he showed up. I wasn't earning enough at that job to cover my rent, so I picked up a second job. Within a week of starting there, in a completely different town, he appeared there too. That time, I directly told the managers who he was. After that, whenever he came in, I was able to hide in the back room behind a locked door while they rushed his order and got him out as quickly as possible. During one of those incidents, while I was hiding in the back, one of the managers was there entering employee time punches into the computer. That's when we both heard Nate yell in our direction, "I know you remember me." That was the breaking point for management. They told him he was no longer welcome there. For a while, he stopped showing up at my other job too, which was a huge relief. A few years passed. I had finally gotten used to not constantly checking over my shoulder during every shift or scanning the parking lot for his truck. Then one day, he showed up again. He was browsing in a section I happened to walk past. When he saw me, he froze like a deer caught in headlights. The second I saw him, I went straight to the break room. Just seeing him made me feel anxious and unsafe. After that, he began showing up regularly again. I always tried to avoid him, but he would eventually spot me and know I was there. I debated telling management. It had been a while since he had done anything openly threatening, and I felt unsure about speaking up just because I was nervous. That was my thought process at the time. What happened next made me regret staying quiet. One night, he managed to catch me at the customer service desk. He walked up and said hello. I immediately started looking around for another employee so I could excuse myself. Before I could say anything, he said something that made my stomach drop. "How's your little girl doing? She's 3 now, right?" I stared at him in shock. I had him blocked on all social media. His number was blocked. I was living at a new address. I hadn't spoken to his mother since the confrontation about the ring. I had never told either of them that I was now a parent or that I was married. I wasn't connected to anyone who was connected to them, yet he knew. "How's your husband doing?" he asked when I didn't respond. "He's good. He's a good man," I replied, trying to make it clear that I was not available and had no interest in any connection with him. "Really? Where does he work?" At that point, I felt like I might pass out. Thankfully, another employee came over to collect some returns, and I took that opportunity to walk away immediately. As I left, he called after me. "I'll see you again. We'll talk. We'll go out and do something together. We will." After that, I reported everything to management, including the personal information he somehow had about me and my family. They pulled up his face on CCTV. I haven't heard anything official, but I assume someone finally confronted him because I haven't seen him since. This has been going on for 10 years, and I want it to finally be over. If he ever shows up again, I will go to the police. I just hope it never comes to that. I just want him to stop. I was a teenager in the 90s, and one night I ended up stuck downtown. It was around midnight when I finally found a bus stop that was at least somewhat well lit. I checked the schedule and realized I might have already missed the last bus for the night, unless it was running late. I decided to sit down on the bench and wait. A few moments later, a tall man walked up and sat directly next to me. There was plenty of space at the stop, but he chose to sit uncomfortably close. He was dressed entirely in black, including a black leather jacket. The kind of sharp, almost glowing color you'd see in a snake. The contrast between his dark clothes and those eyes made him look almost unreal. He took off his leather jacket and placed it over my lap, saying it was to keep me warm. I immediately removed it, handed it back, and said, "No thanks." He kept putting it back on my lap. I glanced around, hoping to see someone else nearby, but the only other person there was a homeless man, passed out on another bench. He started trying to convince me to let him give me a ride. He said it was too late, that it wasn't safe, that my bus probably wasn't coming. I told him, "No thanks, my bus should be here any minute." In reality, I had no idea if a bus was coming at all. The streets were empty and dark, and I was too scared to leave the only well-lit area. After what felt like forever, the bus finally pulled up. It was the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. I stood up quickly and said, "My bus is here." He sneered slightly and muttered under his breath, "You got lucky." I boarded the bus and looked out the window. I saw him walking across the street toward his car, parked in a dark lot. He stood next to it and waved at me, gesturing for me to come over as if that would somehow change my mind. At the time, I was a reckless teenager who partied a lot, stayed downtown late, and thought nothing bad could ever happen to me. But after that night, I never stayed out that late alone again. I really did get lucky, and I had no desire to test that luck a second time. Before I start, please remember I was 20 years old and extremely naive. You can call me stupid. Honestly, I probably was. I know how lucky I am to even be here. I still beat myself up whenever I think about that day. I just want outside opinions. Maybe I'm wrong about him. This was about 20 years ago. I was walking down the street in a pretty rough area during the summer. I had on shorts and a tank top because of the heat. I was very thin back then, almost too skinny, and more than once people had mistaken me for a sex worker. I don't know if that detail matters, but it's part of the story. I was on my way to pick up my son from daycare when a truck full of men started catcalling me. They kept turning around, driving past, yelling things out the window. It was making me nervous. As I passed a gas station parking lot, a man around my age pulled up in a nice car and asked if I wanted a ride. He didn't seem scary. He was actually good looking. So I said yes and got in. He asked where I was headed. I told him it was about a mile straight down the same road. But instead of continuing forward, he drove the opposite direction and said he just needed to turn around. I didn't think too much about it. He started asking about my life, and I told him. I explained that I had just left a domestic violence situation and was staying at a women's shelter nearby. I mentioned that my movements were closely monitored and that I was about to pick up my son. Looking back, that detail might have saved me. At some point, I realized he made another wrong turn. I didn't know the area well, so when I questioned it, he said he was taking a shortcut. I just kept talking. Then I smelled something. Now I know what that smell was. At the time, I didn't. I turned around to check the back seat, thinking maybe there was spoiled food back there. The car was spotless, not a crumb anywhere. I mentioned the smell. He brushed it off and changed the subject, but it kept getting stronger. I asked again what it was. He said he didn't know. Maybe something he forgot to throw out that had gone bad. There was absolutely nothing in that car. Eventually, he dropped me off safely where I needed to go. He didn't tell me his name. He didn't ask for my number. He didn't give me his. I didn't think much of it until much later, when I smelled that same smell again. This time, I knew exactly what it was, and it instantly brought me back to him. This was around 2005 in Covington, Kentucky. I'm convinced the only reason I made it out of that car that day was because he knew I would be missed, and quickly. He knew my whereabouts were being tracked and that people would start looking for me almost immediately. This happened just a few nights ago. I'm 25 years old, about 115 pounds, and I was out working my thoroughbred Shane on the cross-country course doing fitness training. If you're not familiar with that, picture a massive area with open fields, ditches, woods, and jumps placed throughout to test a horse and rider's stamina. We were wrapping up after a long session. It wasn't completely dark yet, but it was getting there, which made me decide it was time to head back in. As we were walking through the area where we had been training, my horse suddenly refused to go near a certain patch of woods. We had passed that same spot multiple times earlier, so I tried encouraging him forward to check it out. That's when I heard what sounded like a human voice. I realized someone had been watching us the whole time. This property is 700 acres, and this particular section isn't anywhere near a road. Whoever was there had intentionally walked deep into the property, very close to where a rider might be. I didn't want to spook my horse, so I calmly turned him around and started moving quickly around that wooded area, giving it a wide berth, planning to head straight back to the main barn. As I reached the middle of the field, Shane suddenly stopped. By then, it was almost fully dark, and that's when I realized something else. There were people in the woods across the field in front of me too, and that was where my safest exit was supposed to be. So now there was someone in the woods roughly 50 yards behind me, and what sounded like multiple people about 50 yards ahead of me. For a second, I considered taking the other exit route, but like I mentioned earlier, this area is far from any road. My immediate thought was that they didn't walk all that way out there. Yes, Shane and I might have been able to outrun them to the gate, but if they had some kind of vehicle, they could easily catch up while I was trying to open it. We stood there for maybe 30 seconds. At the same time, we both seemed to come to the same conclusion. If we moved now, we might beat them. We took off across the field. We slowed just enough to cross a ditch near the woods, the same wooded area where they had tried to block me, and then headed straight for the gate beyond it. I jumped down, unlatched the gate, and didn't even try to remount. Shane is tall, and I'm average height. I just grabbed his reins, and together we ran all the way back toward the barn. Within about 20 yards of the entrance, we were close enough to be heard, and I started yelling, "There are people out by the entrance. Guys, come here." As soon as I began making noise, a four-wheeler started up from just behind the gate and sped off. A police report was filed. The next day, evidence was found showing there had been 2 four-wheelers out there, which made sense since it had felt like I was being surrounded. We aren't going to stop riding out there, but the barn owners are taking precautions now. No one will be riding alone or at night for a while. Maybe it was just a group of teenagers trying to scare someone, but either way, trying to quietly block my exit route wasn't harmless. I can't imagine what their intentions were. I'm just grateful for my overly sensitive horse. If he hadn't reacted the way he did, I might not have noticed anyone at all, especially the people ahead of me trying to move quietly through the woods. Shane was a good boy that day,